I'm Paul Edwards, author of the Mourner's Woods books, and first and foremost, a monster kid. Tonight I'm watching King Kong from 2005, often referred to as Peter Jackson's King Kong. Once upon a time, there was a little boy who was watching the original King Kong, the 1933 King Kong, on television. And he loved the movie, but when King Kong fell off the Empire State Building and died, the little boy burst into tears. He was very affected by this, same as a lot of kids. He was fascinated with King Kong from that point forward. In fact, he tried making his own stop-motion King Kong short movie around the house. Well, as you can guess, this little boy was named Peter Jackson, and he loved King Kong from the moment he saw the movie on TV. And he grew up reading about King Kong and behind-the-scenes materials about how they made the movie King Kong by reading, yes, you guessed it, Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, which often covered King Kong because Forrest J. Ackerman, the editor-in-chief, named King Kong as one of his 5 favorite fantasy films. So, by reading and studying up on King Kong, Peter Jackson really came to know quite a lot about the film and how it was made. He was asked back in the 1990s if he would direct a remake of King Kong, but the opportunity wasn't right at that time. He was getting ready to start work on the Lord of the Rings movies, which of course were phenomenally successful. And so it didn't happen in the 90s. But it did happen in 2005. Peter Jackson, a lifelong King Kong fanatic and famous director, got to direct his own take on King Kong. Well, he pretty much had carte blanche as to what he was going to do. So one result of that, which you might have foreseen coming if you've seen any Lord of the Rings movies, is that this movie is 3 hours long. That's a lot. It didn't have to be 3 hours long. There's stuff that could have been edited out of this. Every bit of this movie is great. Great. But unfortunately, sometimes you have to make tough decisions when editing, and sometimes certain things just have to go, or your project's going to be way too long. So Peter Jackson's King Kong, the worst thing about it is the length. 3 hours. It's a lot to take in if you saw it in the theater. If you're watching it at home, it might be something you watch over the course of 2 nights rather than 1 night. It's a big commitment. Also, they don't even get to Kong's Island for the first hour. For the first hour. Some of that could have been trimmed away. But I'm just pointing out a couple of minor complaints first before I get to the good stuff. It is phenomenal the way that Peter Jackson portrayed not just Kong himself, but Kong's whole island, Skull Island. In the 1933 original movie, Skull Island was replete with prehistoric monsters. Dinosaurs mostly, but as we saw in Son of Kong, the first sequel, which came out the same year, 1933, there were also other kinds of prehistoric beasts that were not dinosaurs, like a huge cave bear and a dragon-seeming monster. Pretty much anything goes on Skull Island. When they remade King Kong in 1976, they removed that important trait of the intellectual property. King Kong was there on the island, and there was a creature large enough for him to fight. There was a gigantic snake, but that was it in terms of giant creatures. There were no dinosaurs running amok on the island. There were no giant insects, giant cave bears, anything that you might associate with Skull Island in the 1976 version. The focus was just on Kong, and the one other giant monster they had, the snake, had a fleeting appearance. Well, Peter Jackson wanted to do it the way it was originally done, where Skull Island is not just the home of Kong, although Kong is master there, but it's the domain of a seemingly limitless supply of different kinds of dinosaurs that have somehow escaped extinction. There are so many different kinds of dinosaurs on this island. There must be a dozen different kinds of dinosaurs that are portrayed here. My favorite of which is a made-up dinosaur. It's a cross between a velociraptor and a Tyrannosaurus Rex called a V-Rex as opposed to a T-Rex. And Kong is hassled by the V-Rex and gets into a long drag-out fight with three of them, which dominates a good portion of his time on Skull Island that we were able to see. Another thing Peter Jackson did was he restored the spider pit scene. This was a scene that originally had been written to go into the 1933 King Kong. In every version of King Kong, there's a scene where there's a ravine and there's a fallen tree over the ravine, and the sailors walk across this log bridge trying to cross over to the other side, and then King Kong comes, grabs the log, and shakes the sailors off, and they fall down to their doom. In the original version of King Kong, there was more to it than that. Down in the ravine, some of the sailors survived the initial fall, and it turned out there were gigantic spiders down there that gobbled the sailors up. Some production was made of this scene. We at least have production stills of it, thanks to Forrest J. Ackerman, who uncovered them after many years. But the actual footage, whatever there ever was, of the spider pit scene does not exist now. But in 1976, they completely omitted any reference to the spider pit. The sailors just fell off the log, and that was that. In Peter Jackson's version, he went to town with the spider pit scene, and he put all kinds of creepy crawlies living at the bottom of the ravine. Gigantic spiders, scorpions, mollusks, all kinds of hideous creatures that the sailors met their grisly doom at the claws of. It was memorable. It was easily the most grisly part of this movie. But it was a scene that we didn't get to see the first two times around. King Kong, of course, makes his way to New York City as a captive of the humans, of course, breaks loose and runs amok in New York City. There's a little more story to his time running amok in New York City than we saw in the 1933 version. Of course, it does not end well for Kong. And once again, he falls to his doom off the Empire State Building, just as he had in the 1933 original. And in fact, Peter Jackson made a point of setting his King Kong back in 1933. Well, Peter Jackson's King Kong, I think, is phenomenal. It does such a good job of portraying not just Kong, but his whole world. There's so much world building in it. However, it has been kind of overshadowed because not long after that, we got Kong Skull Island, which was set in the monsterverse of the legendary films. And this was a precursor to them building up to having King Kong fight Godzilla. So they had to make Kong much larger, and they did a different continuity of life on Skull Island. Listen, if you're a fan of classic monsters and vintage horror, check out my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. I'm self-published on Amazon. My books take place in a haunted forest, different kinds of monsters in each book, different cast of characters in each book. My name again is Paul Edwards. My books are the Mourner's Woods books. Thanks for letting me reminisce with you about King Kong 2005. I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.